I'm Cody McFarland, partner of Axe Legal. Today, I'm here with MTC, Mining Technology Consultants. We are going to be speaking with the founder, Adam Virani, and CFO, Spencer Buchanan, about their precision mining and automation that they're doing here in Chile. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you, Cody.
Great. Look, for everyone that is joining us today, I wanted to ask you guys if you could tell us a little bit about MTC, Mining Technology Consultants, and the type of work that you guys are doing.
No, absolutely. So MTC is a consulting company that supports Tier 1 miners in their transition to an autonomous fleet and with the implementation of precision mining technologies. And for both work streams, we support them from business case, development of business case, and all the way into the implementation, execution, and handover.
Excellent. And here in Chile, can you talk about a little bit more specifically about the work that you're doing with some of the miners here?
So we've had the privilege of supporting Anglo American with the implementation of the autonomous drills at Los Bronces and Quellaveco. In addition to that, we've supported Glencore from business case all the way to implementation, and are continue to support Glencore at Lomas Bayas and Antapacay with their autonomous drilling solution.
Excellent. Why do mining companies need support from companies like MTC?
Look, a lot of this might be the first time that an asset is implementing these types of technologies. So from business case development to implementation, there's little details and nuances and learnings that they might not have. And a lot of the time, the learnings can be expensive. So it's nice and important to have people on the team that have that expertise, that have that knowledge of what does it mean to develop a strong business case for precision mining technologies and for autonomous technologies. In addition to what does it mean for that change management piece, that solution, that training, that handover to be done right and seamlessly. So it's good to have them on your team, for us to be on the team to support with the asset, with these types of challenges.
And do you find that within the mining companies, they have the internal capabilities, knowledge for a lot of these programs, or is that still being built?
I mean, at a high level, yes, because there's great people that are working within the mining companies. But one of the big challenges is you'll have the OEM, the project team, and then the asset team. And so there's a lot of learning just in that working group that happens that can slow down a lot of these projects. So bringing people like us into it really help to create this ecosystem between those three stakeholders and to drive the project forward.
Perfect.
I'll also add in there that it's a very dynamic industry, and so it's always changing. And so right now, for example, if you try to get a level 5 AI shovel, it doesn't exist, but a lot of companies are working on it. So we're constantly working with them, trying to keep up to date. So if you want to get an autonomous technology or an autonomous plan, we can come in there and give the specialized knowledge that you need in that moment.
Excellent.
Yeah, that is a great response. And just to add on to that, because we have those strong relationships and knowledge, again, we are bipartisan, but we really take it upon ourselves, and maybe other companies out there as well, to really understand what's out in the market. So when it comes time for business case development, when we're presented with a solution, there's already an understanding of, when we're presented with a problem, there's already an understanding, or we have an idea of a pathway to a solution.
What is involved with rolling out autonomous technology? Because right now we're hearing a lot about autonomy, about trucks, about drills, and I think a lot of people understand that we have to change out equipment and things, but they don't understand everything that is actually involved.
Ooh, there's so much. We could have an entire show on that. But I guess from a helicopter view, I guess how they say, well, I'll tell you how we like to approach it. So we would like to do kind of like a internal benchmarking where we assess where the mine is at. So we review their fleet, see where they're at. For example, how many hours or meters are left on some of the equipment before an overhaul or a big maintenance. After that, we like to do an opportunity assessment. So then really kind of do a market scan and see how things are going, and then build a plan from that business case part all the way to the implementation, which would involve support with, and what we need to really focus on, and what this involves is development of like new procedures, change management piece, training. So a lot of that is what needs to be really focused on when rolling out different autonomous technology.
And so from what I'm understanding, obviously one is coming up with a business case and choosing the technology, but from what I understand right now is that it's actually the rollout and the implementation that is really the challenge for mining companies.
Absolutely. Look, autonomous technology, precision mining technology in itself is all about people. The technology is 10% of the challenge. The people is the other 90%, right? Because they'll do what we tell them to do. So getting everybody on board, getting everybody upskilled, trained, adopting and really embracing the new procedures and the new technology is the hardest part, because you are now changing the way people fundamentally think when it comes to mining. And when you're changing how they think, you're changing how they work as well, right? So it is the big challenge, and getting people to actually really see the benefits to this and embrace it right away, and also learn that there is and also understand that there is a bit of a learning curve to it, but that is the biggest challenge.
Yeah, but on top of that, it's the mine and the operation that drives the technology, not the other way. So we don't choose the technology and then try and implement it to the mine. So that's a case where it is important at the beginning, because it doesn't matter how good your implementation plan is. If you choose the wrong technology, you're not going to choose an unprofitable plan into one just by having a good implementation plan. So we take a lot of care in that first part, looking at what is the mine right now? What are you operating? What is your geology? All these are very important factors and variables before we decide, okay, this is the proper roadmap for you.
I think that's a really important point that you make, Spencer, because here in Chile, obviously the mines are much different than what you would find in Australia or in Canada. There's obviously little differences between each mine. And so I was hoping to find out, what are some of the things that are unique here in Chile than, say, compared to Australia in terms of how the mines operate?
I mean, here in Chile we have huge copper porphyries, right? And now a lot of these mines are getting into that primary ore. So in Australia, with iron ore, you have grades of like, sorry for laughing, like 50, 60%. But over here, we have a huge challenge where we're seeing grades of 0.4%, 3%. Our cutoff grade is getting lower and lower and lower. And so the implementation of these technologies become more and more important, right? So like, look, for example, if implementing a technology here and there, especially precision mining in that case, right? I mean, when we're trying to build a business case or find that minimal viable product, in Australia it's a bit easier and you have a bit more wiggle room because of how high those grades are. Over here, mistakes are very costly, so it needs to be really on point. You have to have a very strong plan before you go out, even probably ideally simulation as well, because it can be costly.
When you talk about simulation, do you mean like digital twins?
Absolutely.
And how can digital twins be used specifically within when you're autonomizing, your operation?
I mean, like, look, in the aviation industry and the automotive industry, simulations are a huge part of how they've advanced and are more advanced than us in this industry, right? They're not building different types of vehicles and planes and seeing what went wrong. So I think the idea in mining is that we need to start adopting this way of trialing new technologies, because look, maybe it won't be 100%, but if we can kind of attack and solve those little bugs prior to with simulation, then I mean, half the job is there and quite a bit of money is saved.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's better to measure twice and cut once. Look, one of the things I wanted to get into is you are, MTC is very skilled at autonomy, but the other side of the business is also helping miners with their precision mining. And I would like to understand a little bit more, what is precision mining and what does it entail?
So precision mining is essentially, we are trying to reduce the dilution of material that gets into the concentrators. So with precision mining, we improve the resolution at which the operation and grade control team are making decisions for the material destination with different technologies. And what that then does is allow us to extract more ore from the material, right? And so we're not now sending material that's been cut off at 0.4 that now gets to the concentrators and now it's 0.1, right? Like, the idea is to ensure that that right material is getting to the right destination, whether it be concentrators, waste piles, or sulfide piles.
Obviously, that's very important because that's going to lower your energy costs here in Chile with water and everything else. So you
exactly, even with chemicals as well, right? Like, because we don't want that waste getting into the tailings. If we can get the right amount there, or use that right concentration, it's important.
And so precision mining, obviously there's different technologies throughout that process, but could you give us a couple examples of different technologies that you would implement along the process?
I mean, like, look, it always depends on the mine, the problem, and the material, right? I mean, for depending what the problem that you're trying to solve, different materials, different technologies can work for you, right? Whether it be pulse fast thermal neutron activation, PFTNA, which penetrates the rock, or sometimes an XRF is sufficient enough for the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
So, you know, without getting too into it, I think it's really important that we understand the problem prior to selecting the technology for the solution.
Perfect.
I mean, I'll just add on that the general problem of precision ore control was trying to solve is just trying to send less waste to the mill, where it's expensive to process. And so that's just part of the case where if you know this giant rock has a little bit of ore in it, if you don't have good, precise ore control, you'll send the whole rock to the plant, and you'll have a whole bunch of waste in there. And the opposite of that, maybe you know there's a little bit of ore, but not enough, so you send the whole rock to waste, and you lose that opportunity to make that. Whereas if you're more precise with your ore control, then you can break that rock into smaller pieces. You can make more precise decisions. And so at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to lower your cost at the mill by sending less waste. You're trying to extract more ore from your deposit.
No, that's a really good point, and I guess I only touched up on it, but just to bring it to the mining, so we use a block model when making those decisions, right? 15 by 15, 15, depending on where you're at, right? Could be 7 by 7, 15, but if we can reduce that, right? That's what that goal is, and I love that example that you used. If we can reduce that block model, if we can make a decision of how we send that rock, and we can pick it with the teaspoon, and we're sending that teaspoon from the rock to the mill, then we've done our job, right? Like
absolutely. Look, precision mining, I think, is really important, and there's obviously lots of different technologies to help at different points in the process to ensure that you're sending, ore and less waste to the mill. But another question I really wanted to touch on was ore sorting, because that's a big topic right now. In terms of technology that you've seen out there, how close are we to really implementing it on a large scale?
In theory, we are right there, right? The technology is there. Again, it's that people part. It's getting the asset totally involved. It's getting everybody at the asset to go in that same direction. Both OEM, consultant, and asset working together, developing a strong plan and committing to it to execute. So from a technology standpoint, I believe we're there. We as a industry are the people part figuring it out.
That's really interesting, because what I think a lot of people don't understand is the technology has developed a lot in the last, 10, 20 years. But it's a people part that is really needs to change, and that's that change management where companies like MTC can help out with.
Change management, training, I mean, those are huge, because those are part of that adoption and handover. The asset, we will not commit to something unless we really, really know it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's important.
I'll add one more thing too, because obviously change management is key, but the other aspect is how much you can process, because inherently these sensors and these sorters, they are less effective at the higher speed things are moving. And so you kind of have to have that ability to say, okay, how much speed are we willing to sacrifice, or how quick is this technology at actually being able to detect it at that speed? And the technology is catching up, it is improving, but that's another thing that you have to consider when you're saying. I mean, you could take a teaspoon and take it, but that's not a profitable solution, right? So you have to always keep that in mind. Like, you are a company, you're trying to make profit. So you have to consider, okay, is this worth it to implement this technology, and will it be able to handle the throughput that we have?
And that's where the experience comes in. So that goes to that other question of whether they have it in the mind. I mean, I've had the privilege of making a lot of mistakes while I was at BHP, right? That when I was a part of this precision mining team, that's what we were doing. We were really trying to figure out that approach, right? And working very closely with different OEMs and developing that technology to to get to that teaspoon solution. But like you said, does it make sense? Is it right? Is it correct? Is this the right way of doing it? Is this the right technology to implement for the problem that we have, for the type of material that we have, right? So for the mineralization that is in our ore body. So that's where that experience can be very valuable.
Interesting. And so my last question sort of about precision mining is, in your guys' opinion, how far along are companies in terms of really implementing precision mining as a general idea and really being able to get down to this kind of teaspoon?
So when you say company, do you mean the OEM or the asset?
I would like to talk more about the assets and how close are we seeing that most, do you see most operations already implementing this, or it's still very new and it's very unique?
So I would say that it's very new. There are different clients, and we've had 2 different clients. We've had the privilege of building their pre-concentration or precision or control strategy. And look, what's making me happy is that now I'm seeing that these project teams are getting more of the asset involved, because this is more of a holistic approach. It's not just an operations problem. It's not just a project team or a technology problem. It's a holistic problem. So it's great to see that a lot more of the asset are rallying around it. But you are correct. It is still somewhat new. It still hasn't been done. But the technology is there, right? Maybe some of the technologies at that 2.0 stage, but 3.0 is going to be like, right? So they are there. But also I feel that the assets, the people are starting to catch up as well.
Excellent.
So I can't really put a year of when it's going to happen. Sorry there. So.
No, we don't need a year, but I think it's good to understand is there still opportunities? Is there still new technology being introduced, and how far along have the mining companies really have come?
No, there's lots of technologies that are also helping other technologies get to that 3.0 gap. So it's exciting to see with all the developments that are happening, both on the technology side, but on the asset people side.
Awesome. Look, one of the unique things about your experience and the experience of MTC and everyone that works there is that you really have the experience of working in the operational side with the mining companies, but also on the other hand, working with technology companies and seeing kind of both sides of the picture. So I really wanted to get some questions and ask you kind of about technology and just general ideas about how we implement different technologies from an operational standpoint. In terms of you are you're sitting there bringing in new technology, and you're obviously with the asset owners. And what is the biggest complaint you're seeing from the asset owners in terms of how they work with technology companies or how things are working in that aspect?
Okay, so I guess the biggest complaint that I've seen and experienced, and this is coming from Adam Virani, both in the operation and as a consultant, is, and I don't think the OEMs intentionally do this, but a sense of transparency, right? A lot of the OEMs sometimes are excited once that PO comes, and because maybe past experience or what they truly believe, they have a set of processes and procedures in place which doesn't really adapt to what the asset's at, one, but then number 2, that their technology isn't as far as long as they also believed. And so I think that's a frustrating thing, because right away you feel like, oh, I've been duped, or there wasn't too much transparency in that conversation, and it's just frustrating, because if I knew from the beginning, then I could have helped, right? If I knew that, oh, when you give me this process or this technology, or how far along it's on, and but Adam, we know that we have gap A, B, and C, then I can already be proactive and start to attack it, get the asset involved, and it's more of a partnership solution. When there's a sense of, they weren't transparent, I didn't know about this, they never said that, then you don't feel that it's a partnership. Then there's a sense of, well, I'm the client and you're the OEM, and that's not always a fun place to be.
And so, from what I understand is that I'm an OEM, I'm bringing new technology, and sometimes there might be deficiencies or areas that aren't as strong in terms of, and so I'm not being super upfront about the potential problems.
Well, just be proactive, right? If there are some bad experience that you've had before, maybe you can say to me, hey, look, this is what we've seen before. Let's try to do A, B, and C. Because look, I'll tell you this much: the asset wants the technology to be successful just as much as the OEMs want the technology to be successful, right? I mean, like there's a lot going into it: money, time, energy, emotion. You know, projects don't have emotion, but it's hard not to get into it when you're making that big change in an asset.
Absolutely.
So it'd be good to at least put it on the table. Like I said, I don't think it's intentional, right? Everyone's always putting their best foot forward. But I mean, we are all human as well, right? And so I think it'd be good just to have everyone on the playing field.
Yeah, sorry. And I think a very interesting thing about this industry, especially when it comes to new technology, is that there is a bit of a partnership that's naturally going to happen. I mean, there's not a whole bunch of free minds where people can practice their technology on. So if you're going to try and put on an autonomous, any equipment and try and join a fleet, you do kind of have to go into that a little bit blind in terms of that, and you have to work with the asset. And so that's a thing that is very important to kind of be upfront and that they work together. I want to add on, another major complaint is that the asset leaves right after they implement the technology. They don't stick around to help afterwards. So that's another key thing that will frustrate the asset, is they need something, something doesn't work, and then they have to call, and someone's out in Australia. And so that's another key thing too, is to make sure that someone's there as well to help the asset after implementation.
And would you say that if I bring a technology to a mining company, I should have a clear plan of how I'm going to provide, support and everything else after? Do you think they appreciate it? How detailed of a plan do you need to put together for them, or is that something that you work, along the way?
No, that's important, and you touched on that as well with OEMs staying, not just leaving once it's been delivered. No, it's important to have a strong, solid plan prior to the implementation, right? Be proactive. Like a lot of technologies with sensors require a lot of legalities. There's a bit of back work that needs to be done. So when the PO is created, be proactive. Figure out what type of documentation needs to be put in place. Obviously, the asset helps because it is their site and they have their own way. But you can also be proactive in advancing in a lot of that type of work. Number two, as Spencer was saying, also be proactive about having a plan in place for that handover. It shouldn't just be, dump and go. Be very clear with the asset as well that you want to have somebody that kind of hangs around, get that into the contract and PO. So we can also, the asset can also plan around that as well, in creating, maybe a strong mini support model with that technology there.
And so you think the mining companies are open to having someone on site there for whatever X amount of time to just make sure that, the sensors are always up, that everything's operating? I
mean, like, look, if it's planned appropriately and put into the PO and integrated appropriately into the asset, then absolutely, right? I mean, they're just as invested in the success of the technology as the OEM.
And so once you've actually installed technology, regardless of what it is, obviously there's some things that are more technical and more detailed than others, but in general, what can a technology company do to make sure that their software or sensors or whatever is being used after they've done the implementation, after everything is said and done?
That is a really good question, because I have seen way too many times these technology companies, especially with softwares, be installed but not optimized, right? So I think it's really important for these companies to have a strong training plan and change management plan as well. But that training really is key for that adoption piece. And maybe linger around a bit more. Check in, but also have in your contract, maintenance strategies where even for software, where people are kind of coming in, checking to make sure that it's up to date and that it's also being used appropriately, right? Like little training touch points, little refreshes, because also as Spencer was saying, the mining industry is very dynamic as well. So
and people are moving
constantly.
Yeah.
Constantly, right? Game of Thrones in the industry is always happening. So, when if there is that movement, it's good. It's nice to know that at least the OEM is there, is that stable piece to
absolutely
to help push along.
I'll also add on that you can do yourself a lot of favors in the implementation process if you try not to operate in a silo by yourself. So sometimes you might have the project innovation team, they try and do everything by themselves and then throw it on the operational team. And I think you would do a lot more, or you'd be a lot more efficient if you started talking to the operational team right away, as early as possible. And they're already starting to point out things that may not work for them, and so that's a great way to start and makes your change management way easier when you're trying to do the handover.
Excellent. That's a really good point. Spencer, you come from more of a finance background, and I'm curious. One of the complaints I've seen from other mining companies is that sometimes the pricing of the solutions doesn't justify. And so I was wondering, as you're kind of looking at different technologies, are you guys looking at sort of the price as well, and seeing how once you implement that technology, does it make sense in terms of cost and benefit?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very important, and that's the aspect in the business case. And sometimes with these projects, they'll make the business case and they throw it out the window. Now we've gotten the approval, let's start implementing. And so that's one thing that I see is there's not that follow-up, there's not keeping up with the costs and making sure it's lining up. And so that's one aspect of it, but it's very important to consider that, and there's a lot of things to consider. There are a lot of variables that play into this, and so that's one thing too. Your model's only as good as the variables you put into it, or as the model is. So you have to be very precise in that point when you're developing your NPV, and you have to also understand the risks involved. And I was explaining this to a company the other day. If you have two projects and they both produce the same NPV, let's say, and then you look at one, you say, there's a lot more risks in this one. This is a lot more undeveloped technology. You have to consider that. So risks are sometimes swept aside when mines are looking at the costs, and that's one thing to consider. So you have to really consider that whole holistically when you're making these decisions.
I think a lot of times in these models that you guys are doing, there's also a lot of assumptions. I mean, we're assuming, the uptime of trucks or other factors. So there's more to it than just a simple 1 + 1.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think there's a good baseline of information and data that we have in order to make those assumptions.
You guys have talked a lot about the communication between the OEMs and the asset owners and the operational teams. What can these technology because sometimes we come in and we have one point of contact, and obviously we have introductions and meetings, but we don't get to build a relationship right away with all these different teams within the mining companies, within these assets. And so is there something that these technology companies can do to further develop with the operational team or with these different stakeholders? Just because sometimes from our perspective of working with technology companies, and the complaint that we see from their side is that sometimes the mining companies, you don't have the FaceTime with everyone. And so, one person's concern is not always another person's.
No, that is true. I guess it's important to develop that strong relationship with your stakeholder at the asset, but they will have the opportunity to meet other areas. And I think it's important for these technology companies to target, I guess, their speech or their narrative or their presentation. I mean, there is that one core of their technology, and there's that core piece to their narrative, but they need to fine-tune the outside of it for the people that they're speaking to, right? What is important to the leadership team won't be important to the people in the field, right? They have a different focus and a different goal. I mean, the goal is the same, but there's a different motivating factor and work thrown on them. So it's important that you tailor a lot of your conversations and engagements to the stakeholder that you're dealing with.
Excellent.
You can also, if you're an OEM from a different country, it's very helpful to have a team here in the country to help, and that's very important.
I would love to touch on that point because that's something that we've been trying to convey to a lot of our clients over the last few years is the importance. In terms of having a team here, are we talking about needing, a huge team, or is it just having, in most cases, 1 or 2 or 3 technical people that can answer questions and respond?
It's the chicken and egg situation, right? Do you develop a team when you get the PO, or do you have the team prior to the PO, right? Look, for me personally, and I can speak from experience on as the operation, but also as the consultant. I think it's important to have a entity within the company because it makes engagement and site visits and just overall working as a team a lot easier. So I mean, and then you can start to build up the team as the work grows. But I think it's important to have a team, an entity, and a team, a person or two on site to really represent. And it's important that those people really know the technology. Very frustrating when you have a conversation and the person's like, okay, let me refer back to Australia. Okay, let me refer back to Canada. Look, we are human. We can't know everything about everything. But sometimes there's basic questions of a technology and it's like, you should know this, right? Like you should know this. You shouldn't have to go back to Canada or Australia or wherever to touch base and get the answer for the question.
Excellent. And so in terms of you have two technologies, competing technologies, for example, how important it is to the mining companies here in Chile that, you know, there is an office, that there is a team here? So if you have two competing technologies, do you think that they would choose the one with an office here compared to the one who hasn't quite have the local team?
Look, I can't speak to that. I mean, obviously it helps having the local team, but then the technology and how it helps solve the problem is also plays a big part as well, right? I mean, if everything in a vacuum is equal, then obviously the technology that is here and easier to work with and already has that setup within the country, then obviously that makes it easier. But again, all equal in a vacuum.
And language skills? What about language skills? Because obviously we can have Australians or Canadians come to Chile, but you have to work with, you know, the Chilean teams here, and English is not always the strongest point for everyone.
Well, when in Rome, right? It's important, of course. So language is key.
Well, I'll also add on. I know I'm not gonna put any names out, but it's. There were some cases where we were making a business case and we really recommended a certain technology. They didn't have a base here. And the other technology, which we thought was probably not the best option for them, did have a base here. And the company would choose that technology. And I think that played a huge role in their decision, was having people here who spoke the language to them. They were people from Chile. So I think that definitely helped them win the PO in that case.
Thank you. That's a really important piece of insight there. My last question is, for you, being involved on the technology side, what is the most exciting technology or areas that are being developed that you're really excited about moving into the future?
Ooh, in the AI space.
Yeah?
Yeah, that is getting exciting. Well, first of all, I'm just excited to be in this part of the industry, to be in the industry as a whole, because there's a lot of advances in technology, but also what's exciting about it is that the assets and the people are also super motivated. So it's fun to be there. Look, we don't know what we don't know, but everyone is motivated about finding that solution. And a specific area of that of this industry that is exciting for me is the AI space, on both for automation and also in the precision mining technology space. I really think it's going to play a huge role in advancing this industry.
There's a lot of data coming out of these different systems, so
Yeah.
it has to be used somewhere.
Absolutely, yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to sit down with me and speak, and some of the tips and different insights that you were able to provide. Hopefully they're useful for everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.